Okay, another Mrs. H Psychology for AQA Psychology. Paper 1, social influence topic, and this time it's conformity to social roles. So the work of Zimbardo. Okay, so let's have a look at this. The aim of Zimbardo's work was to investigate how far people would conform to social roles. Okay, so how far identification would occur. Now, identification is both, remember, it's both private and public acceptance. So in identification, basically they're following an internal script of the behaviours that are needed in that role. So this is if they asked you to outline a study maybe on how identification was investigated, this would be Zimbardo's work. So you could have a look also at my video on distinguishing between different types of conformity to have a look at identification in a bit more detail. But here, let's have a look at Zimbardo's work, what we need in terms of the method. Okay, so lots and lots of detail on this. You don't need loads, but if they ask you for 3 marks to outline the method, you want some detail. So here we go. 21 white male volunteers from Stanford University selected as they were physically and mentally stable. So they were assessed as being physically and mentally stable from the cohort who volunteered. 10 of them were assigned to guards, 11 as prisoners, and what's important is they were randomly allocated to the role of prisoner or guard. You could also include detail like the guard's uniform, including reflective sunglasses so they couldn't make eye contact. They were given truncheons, but physical punishment wasn't allowed. We could also talk about the dehumanization of the prisoners. So they were deloused, they were given a numbered smock, so nothing else but a smock to wear for their uniform. They were referred to by number later instead of name to dehumanize them and de-individuate them. The whole study was meant to last for 2 weeks, as we know, and Zimbardo was also acted as the prisoner superintendent as well as the experimenter, so he played this dual role. So plenty of detail there. Now it's loads, too much for a 3 marker, so you would pick out some of that detail, but you can see that you do need this detail. Results. As the experiment continued, the guards became more and more sadistic. We had de-individuation occurring. So in other words, things like referring to just numbers only and not prison names. Examples like after 36 hours, the first prisoner had to be released because of fits of crying and angry outbursts. One prisoner had severe rash when his parole was denied. And as we know, it was stopped after 6 days. Okay, so what else we want to say? We would maybe put in the conclusion that it was actually looking at situational factors versus dispositional, and here it was concluded that the situation was more important than anything to do with their disposition, in other words, their innate personalities. Here, the situation caused, if you like, the bad apple. So we also may be asked to evaluate Zimbardo's research, and these are the main areas really. Ethics, obviously, protection from harm, and you all know what we mean by that. They should leave in the same state that they arrived, and obviously they didn't. And what's important here is, could their distress have been anticipated, and therefore should they have been allowed to proceed with that? Or you could talk about the lack of the right to withdraw. They're meant to be able to and be allowed to withdraw at any point, but for example, parole was denied to a prisoner, so he wasn't allowed to leave. You could talk about something completely different, so Zimbardo's dual role. And obviously, if he's playing both roles, he couldn't objectively view the events unfolding, and also his very presence as superintendent would have influenced the events, and that really causes us to question the validity of the whole experiment. Other methodological issues, for example, sample bias. We know there were white young men from Stanford University, and that is not a cross-section of society. They were also a volunteer sample, so we know that we've got bias in there, and therefore we're limited in generalizing, and that means we haven't got the scientific credibility or the validity. So there's plenty you could talk about there. However, on the other hand, what was positive about it, what was a real strength about it, it gave a good insight into human behavior, which is a little bit counterintuitive because we think we're going to behave in one way. So, and we often are surprised when we do scientific research to find that we actually behave quite differently. So here, the guards and prisoners, both of them, were surprised at the uncharacteristic behaviours that they showed. All right, so that really supports this, our kind of common sense beliefs are often very different to our scientific findings.